You're not echoing, so
I'm not echoing, so that's good.
something.
You're fine.
Okay. It's just there's no mute button. Like first time for everyone. Oh, fancy room. Let's meet here every day. Worthy.
No council overflow.
Okay, we are streaming. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the 16th regular meeting of the Government Transition Advisory Committee. Today is Wednesday, January 10th, and we will be here from 6 to 8 p.m. My name is Julia Meyer. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm the Engagement and Community Participation Manager for the transition. I'm very happy to say that our new co-chairs, Destiny and Zach, will be facilitating tonight's meeting. Next slide, please. And before we get started, I'm just going to take a minute to go over some meeting and Zoom logistics. This is a hybrid meeting. This meeting is being live streamed on YouTube, and a copy of the recording of the meeting will be posted on the city's transition webpage under past meetings and events. For today's meeting, we have closed captioning, American Sign Language, and Spanish language interpretation available. To access Spanish interpretation, please click on the globe icon at the bottom right of your screen and select Spanish. To access closed captioning, click on the CC button on the bottom right side of your screen. For committee members, please take this moment to change your chat settings to everyone so that folks listening in today can follow along. The meeting chat is part of the public record. For community members listening in, we have the Zoom Q&A feature available. You can submit questions or comments through the Q&A function. We may not answer all of your questions live during the meeting, but they also become part of the public meeting record. At today's meeting, we do have time for verbal public comment, but as a reminder, you can submit written public comment at any time through our comment form online by emailing us at transition@portlandoregon.gov. And you can also give public comment by calling 311. And with that, I will turn it to Destiny to review tonight's agenda.
Thank you, Julia. Tonight's agenda includes committee business, public comment, committee engagement updates, committee engagement 2024 strategies, city budgeting process, transition budget development, and the change management plan. Before we adjourn our meeting today, we will close with a brief review of our next steps. And next slide, please. Thank you, June. No committee members have indicated that they are unable to attend tonight's meeting, but one member, Leah, did ask for time to share an announcement. Leah?
Thank you, Destiny. This will be a review for people that were at yesterday's voter education subcommittee yesterday. I wanted to inform the committee that starting next week, I will be working for Multnomah County as the Ranked Choice Voting Project Manager, which I'm very excited about. Want to make sure that everyone knows about that. After discussions with Julia and getting feedback from the transition team, there are no conflicts of interest in terms of me participating on GTAC. However, we've decided that I should step down from the voter education subcommittee to make sure that there's not any confusion about my roles. I will be continuing to serve on the regular GTAC committee and excited to do so. If you have any questions about this, feel free to email me and I'm happy to give you more information. That's all. Thank you.
Congratulations.
Thank you, Leah, and congratulations again. Fabulous announcements. Following more committee meeting agendas, we need to approve the 2 meeting summaries from our December 5th and December 18th meeting that were distributed to you last week. And for the first one, do I have a motion to approve the December 5th meeting summary?
I'll move.
I think Leah moved and Jose seconded it. And now I will call for a vote, yay or nay, to vote to approve those meeting minutes.
Yay.
Okay, I see a bunch of thumbs up, so those have been approved and passed. Thank you. And then do I have a motion to approve the December 18th meeting summaries?
Motion. To approve.
I didn't quite hear who.
It was
Oh, yeah,
Amy.
Amy
Randall.
motion. And then a seconded,
A second.
Ray, what did you want to say?
Lori second.
You could talk.
All right, and then can I get yay or nay for voting to approve the meeting summary? See a bunch of thumbs up in the chat or in the views. Okay, so those are approved. Thank you so much. Next slide, please. Okay. And then our final order of committee business is to review the working agreements. The working agreements state as follow. First, in discussions, challenge ideas rather than individuals, offer constructive suggestions. Second, approach different opinions with curiosity, seek to understand. Third, keep the needs and concerns of the local community and the larger region at the forefront of the work. 4, arrive on time and prepared to the best of your ability. Let the group know if you're unable to attend a meeting. And the co-chairs will aim to incorporate tools for breathers. 5, keep multitasking to a minimum. 6, keep focus on the objectives of the meeting. Utilize co-chairs to note additional topics for discussion by submitting topics in writing via email. Next slide, please. Okay, honor the decisions of the group. 8, contribute to the overall success of the group by finding ways to participate that best meets your needs. 9, step up, step back, collectively work to ensure that every member who wants to be heard is heard. 10, embrace conflict and work with your fellow committee members and staff to find ways to give each other feedback. The co-chairs will aim to incorporate various feedback tools. 11, use I statements. And now, Julia, please introduce the public comment section.
Thank you, Destiny. So we ask community members to sign up ahead of time through the website. We've had 2 people sign up tonight. Each person will have 3 minutes to give testimony, and they are both joining us via Zoom. So the folks are, I see both of you, Alan and Vicky. Alan, you're first. You're gonna get an invitation to be promoted to a panelist. We see Alan, hold on one sec. Alan, I see you. I know you've been here before. I see you
Okay,
took
hi.
yourself up. Yeah, so you have 3 minutes. I'm going
Alright, I need
to,
just a minute here to, just if you may, if I may, hang on, I just need to align this correctly. Okay, if you can still hear me, I can go now. So was there something else you wanted to tell me?
no, go for it.
All right, thank you. I listened to yesterday's subcommittee, Education Outreach Subcommittee, and I do very much appreciate that staff addressed the subcommittee my questions that came in the form of comments last month and in writing. So I very much appreciate staff's efforts there. I want to thank Terry Harris and other subcommittee members for driving the issues I identified forward with a motion in yesterday's meeting. It didn't pass. So I think that's unfortunate. I did hear everything on this topic in the meeting, but And I understand, first of all, I want to say that the goals of getting outreach to underserved communities is extremely important. It's part of the charter mandates. It's what Portlanders want. And there aren't that many organizations that can do that. I understand all that. But you're going to have a 501c3 nonprofit that's also a PAC. It's the same brand. And unless I misunderstand something, it's the same staff members. They'll be able to divide their time between the two functions. And they're going to go out there and do get out the vote outreach work that will simultaneously provide nonpartisan outreach and education information and partisan positioning, for particular candidates. It's really going to get a negative reaction from the city. And I think you really need to rethink this. And I'll end my comments by saying that listening to staff yesterday, there was a couple of things that were not correct. The PAC may not be formulated currently to do outreach work, political work in 2023 or 2024, but I think it can change that at any time. And specifically, Portland United for Change organized a rally against two city commissioners that were holding simply a work session in July of 2022. So that sounds like that's in contradiction to what its Oregon filed PAC mission is, but they were trying to disrupt a city work session on modest amendments to charter reform. And this is the organization that you want to have do city outreach on get out the vote. Thank you.
May I just enter a clarification? This is from yesterday. Madam Chair, Destiny.
Julia, should we get the second comment and then if
there's a question for me, I'd be happy to answer it.
May I? Destiny?
let's get the second public comment and then
Okay.
Fred to follow.
All right.
up with Nathan.
Stay tuned, Alan.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, Vicky, I see you, so same thing, I'm gonna promote you to a panelist. You should get an invite, just please accept that. You can come into the room, can leave your camera on or off as you want. And you have 3 minutes whenever you're ready, Vicky, thank you for being here.
Thank you. 1 second. Sorry.
Okay.
Oh, there it goes. Okay. Hi, my name is Vicky Payne, and my comments today are personal, even though I am an employee of Multnomah County and a volunteer with a political action committee. As I have testified to this commission previously, I'm very concerned about the contracting process for voter outreach. After hearing commission conversations and other public testimony in past meetings, in particular the subcommittee meeting yesterday, I've grown even more concerned. I don't think the city understands the bad optics these voter outreach contracts are going to have with the large percent of Portland voters who didn't vote for charter reform. Many who are against it, specifically against the idea of ranked choice voting, not necessarily myself, but I know a lot of people were. So to hear that at least one organization who fundraised to push a yes on charter vote in 2022 is going to get a bunch of money to quote unquote teach underserved communities how to vote while technically legal sounds pretty bad when you hear it out loud. Once again, I'm asking the commission if the City of Office of Community and Civic Life is playing a role in ensuring all avenues of outreach are exhausted. I don't know if you guys are able, I can put my email in the chat again. I submitted it when I signed up, but I've asked a couple of these questions before, so I'm kind of repeating myself, but I'm going to again remind you that the original Charter Commission paid a lot of money to get a little over 1,000 residents to respond to a survey. So you'll forgive me for not trusting that outsourcing this work is a good use of taxpayer dollars. I'll also remind you that all voters in Portland need educational outreach to be taught how the new voting system works, not just underserved communities. So one mailer to each household is really not sufficient, particularly compared to how much is being spent on specific communities. In doing all this, we need to be seeing target metrics, and this commission should be planning to receive very regular updates as to how many people were reached each week, particularly to see trends in what methods they find are working better than others, et cetera, et cetera. I did miss 1 or 2 of your meetings, but is there an update on a previous question I posed about money being spent on outreach to Portland voters who reside in Clackamas and Washington counties? Because there are voters there that are Portland residents. I asked these questions because, for instance, I recently watched a Metro PBOT project meeting on 82nd Ave. It was pretty flabbergasted to learn that they were okay moving forward on a vote when only 6 community members from one neighborhood responded to their outreach efforts. It turns out the organization they hired to do this work didn't even notify the neighborhood or business associations. And while I know there's a controversy in the city about diversity in these groups, they shouldn't be excluded from these conversations. It's a fallacy to assume that all members of underserved communities are served by these community organizations that are supposed to represent them. We need to go beyond these nonprofit orgs to do true outreach on the ground in neighborhoods at all types of community gathering spaces. I'm once again asking if these organizations are going to be barred from endorsing and backing specific city council candidates and also any of their sister arm organizations, as generally these people have backup nonprofits to work around pesky rules like that. It's horrifying to me to think the same people who are teaching people how to vote could be influencing them on who to vote for at the same time on the taxpayer's dime. Are you going to work with any partners who do not lobby for a yes vote on Measure 26228? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Vicki.
Thank you, Vicky. We do have 4 more minutes for this part of the agenda. So Fred, you could ask your question.
Right. Thank you, Destiny. The question I had for Alan is you stated that Portland United for Change is a 501c3 aligned with the PAC. The Corporations Division's registry has Portland United for Change as a limited liability company, not as a 501c4. And there is a difference. And I tried to make that distinction in the subcommittee meeting yesterday.
All right, I'd be happy to be educated by that, but you're still gonna have someone on a city contract
Oh, yeah.
simultaneously doing get out the vote, which is, I assume, nonpartisan, and having the ability to do partisan work. If I'm mistaken on that, that was not what I understood yesterday. And I don't know, and I did hear yesterday that there was gonna be like monitoring of the message. But then why do you need a third party to deliver the message? You need a person to go out there and do the outreach to these communities, and you're never going to be able to monitor that. And even if it is unbiased messaging, it's going to be right next to some advocacy. So either get them to get out of the PAC business, or don't give them the contract to do the outreach.
I have no problem with your testimony whatsoever, Alan or Vicky. I was just trying to raise a point of clarification. Thank you.
Thank you, Fred. Thank you, Alan. Thank you,
Thank you,
Vicky.
Destiny.
Absolutely. And so we have 2 minutes left. I see Jose and Bill have their hands up. And Amy, if you could actually put this in the chat so that we can maintain this meeting agenda and also the conversations from yesterday. The motion did not pass, and so that was pushed forward, and we do have more voter education meeting and agendas to go forward, but I want to keep this meeting on track. And again, thank you, Alan, Vicky, and Fred for your comments. And I do want to point in, Julia, that there is another Portland United for Change LLC that is a different entity, and there is more questions and comments in the chat.
I also want to recognize Juliet's request for summary. So just to remind everybody who may not have been at the meeting yesterday, I encourage you to attend our future meetings, but also you're welcome to go back and listen, and there will be meeting summary up online shortly after it will get approved at our next meeting.
Thank you. Amy, I still see your hand raised. Did you want to put that in the chat? I'm sorry. Okay, thank you. I will hand over the next slide again to Zach. Thank you so much for this part of our meeting.
Thanks, Destiny. Thanks, Alan. Thanks, Vicky, for your testimony today. So we have some time reserved, as always, for committee members to share their insights from their community engagement efforts. So if you wouldn't mind, if you're interested in sharing something of your engagement, we have about 5 minutes for this, so we could have 1 or 2 people share out. Is anybody interested? Amy, go ahead.
Yeah, so this isn't community engagement as much as I went to the candidate education evening that happened the other night, and I just wanted to share about it. There was probably about 50 or 60 potential people running for office. I brought the guides they shared with potential candidates. And it was really eye-opening to just see the level of detail that people are kind of being shared right now. And the question that I wanted to bring to the city staff, to the transition staff, is about like, how are people gonna stay in touch with each other? There was like not a lot of interaction with like other candidates or potentially interacting like together. Is there any kind of vision for like bringing people in environments to interact together?
And I don't know if we have anybody in the room who's able to answer that from the city staff. If we do, please go ahead. Otherwise, maybe we can have our voter education subcommittee discuss that. I mean, I think it's a good idea for sure, and something we should know about. Okay, hearing nobody in the room or any of our staff members raising their hands, I'm gonna move forward to having Leah report out on your engagement.
Yeah, thank you. June asked if I could just quickly speak to engagement from last month. The one that I want to highlight is I was lucky enough to be able to go to the Wilkes Neighborhood Association, which is the furthest north and east neighborhood in the city, right on the border with Gresham. Which I point out because it was great and that people had a lot of really good questions about ranked choice voting, curious about how that will work, wanting to understand the difference between the mayor and the city administrator. But the comments that stuck with me the most was how many people in the room said that they were really moved by the fact that the city seems to be paying attention to them, that they'd never had representatives from the city come to one of their meetings before, and that it just felt special. And it reminded me why we're doing this, why it's important to have a district that's representing East Portland, and it was nice to have that reflected back in the moment. So, thank you.
Very good.
And I think this is a good time. I will probably reiterate something that June will say in our next couple of slides, but I do encourage everybody to continue to do outreach and sign up for future community engagement opportunities. I think it's a good way of, one, getting into the community and supporting the city and our contracts efforts to getting out the vote and getting information in a nonpartisan way to a broad range, to have the best diversity and representation in our future city council. So entering 2024, transition team took some time over the holiday since we last met to reflect on and evaluate our collective engagement to date and strategize about how we can do better in meeting our commitments for the new year. So June, I'll pass it to you and go ahead and do next slide.
Hey everyone, thanks Zach. My name is June Reyes and I am the Transition Engagement Coordinator, and I just wanted to remind everyone that a big part of my role is to really support you all in your engagement and education efforts. So a lot of what I'm going to present to you in terms of the tools, et cetera, that we have is because y'all have asked for it. So thank you for asking, doing your engagement and giving us the feedback. So I'm going to provide an overview of GTAC's engagement to date, review sort of a path forward to be able to increase our engagement, and remind folks of tools that are available to support community engagement efforts. So first, I think I've said this before, but I think it's important to recognize how important GTAC is for public engagement. And so just that we have a lot of appreciation that you guys are just a key partner in offering not only your insights and community insights, but additional support and community education. I also wanted to highlight that the city is ultimately accountable for community engagement, and that as transition staff, we have the responsibility to create those spaces for the public to engage and coordinate the efforts, or coordinate our engagement efforts and events, and also be the lead on communication. So we have a lot of responsibility there as well. So I want to just kind of ground us in the transition community engagement plan. that was developed by a GTAC work group and approved by GTAC in July 2023. And I bring this up just because I use this as a roadmap for our community engagement work. And I just want to highlight a few items in the approach. One is the emphasis on engagement early in the process, with a feedback loop to kind of understand what folks are saying and how their input was used. Another piece, investing education and engagement resources in those traditionally left out of City Hall and city decision-making. And the last piece of the approach is really thinking about different ways for engaging. So not just one way, but lean on multiple ways of reaching people. And I think, as you all know, what we are striving for is 2 quarterly education or engagement opportunities in community, totaling 126, with at least one of those opportunities in partnership with communities traditionally left out of City Hall decision making. So before diving into some of these numbers, I also want to ground the conversation whenever I talk about numbers that these numbers are more than just the goals that we're trying to meet. They really offer benchmarks for our progress, help us course correct, and they actually also represent these real people that we've been talking to, Portlanders who have a stake in this. And so I think I just also wanted to, give us a chance to celebrate the voices that have been contributing to the dialogue around the transition, and that has been happening because of a lot of your efforts. And per GTAC's quarterly commitment, each committee member should be at about 4 presentations. But I just wanted to recognize some folks who've kind of far exceeded that commitment. So just to put a few folks on the spot, Terry, you have done at least 10 presentations. Yes, Terry knows this. Jose, 8. He would have done 9 if it didn't get canceled on Sunday, so 8. Leah, Lori, and Zach have done 6. Juliet with 5. And so I know that y'all are also having those one-on-one conversations with folks that is not reflected in that number. So just know that, there's a lot that you all are doing, and we really appreciate that effort. And what this also does is kind of reminds us of those we also need to spend more time reaching out to. So I guess I'll continue, and I'll pause for questions in a little bit.
Yeah.
So back to the numbers, as of today, we have 42 presentations completed and 14 that have been scheduled up to April 2024. And just a quick note that I'm including scheduled briefings because of a couple of things. One, that sometimes it just takes a while to schedule something and build trust with folks to be like, okay, we can work towards these later dates. Or sometimes, we just got to reschedule stuff. And so that's kind of reflected in that number. Groups representing people left out of City Hall decision-making comprise of 1/5 of the folks we're talking to, so 20%. And neighborhood associations make up about half of our briefings. And at our current pace, about 8 to 12 presentations per month, we're going to exceed our goal of 126 presentations. However, we have some catching up to do to meet the commitment of half of the briefings or engagement being in communities left out of City Hall decision-making. And really, we can get there, and to get there, though, we'll probably need to focus on having 2 out of the 3 presentations be for groups left out of City Hall. And so I'll talk a little bit more later about some of the strategies we're going to be doing to get there. And so I'm gonna go through 2 more slides in terms of showing you all sort of where we're at, and then I think that'll be a good time to pause for questions before we get into strategy. So because we talked about how neighborhood associations are half of the engagement so far, I wanted us to take a closer look about the reach, to look at the reach within neighborhood associations and kind of use this map as a tool. So first, the neighborhoods in purple are the ones that we've talked to their associations, or we have, a schedule, something that's scheduled. So one thing I want to point out is that the number of neighborhood associations varies by district. So for example, you'll see District 1, which is East Portland. The associations are larger in size, and so they encompass more residents. So if you look at the populations within those larger swaths, you're looking at 12,000 residents per neighborhood on average. And while if you look at District 2 and 3, they're smaller in size, and they're about 5 to 6,000 residents per neighborhood. And District 3, there's about 2 and 4 is 5 to 6,000, and District 4 is District 3 is 9,000. So just to say that, well, I guess let me get to another observation. I will also say that participation levels vary. And so looking back at your reports from the GTAC tracker, there are differing levels of participation in neighborhood associations. I think we all know that, but it's, anywhere from, having 70 people at a neighborhood association meeting to maybe having a dozen folks or less. And so it'll always just vary. And so what does that mean for us? So for me, my takeaway is that where we have, neighborhoods that encompass larger populations like District 1, and we see that these neighborhood associations just have a lot more people in them, I think it's just important to extend beyond just the associations to engage the community members effectively. In addition, we also know that Portland's identify as different groups, and so while the geography is a key way to bring people together and a key identifier for folks, the non-geographic groups also play a key role in this. And so, pushing us to look outside of the neighborhood associations will help us sort of get a larger cross-section of folks. And then I wanted to quickly talk about place-based groups. So, our data always tells us that we are not doing a great job of reaching out to East Portland. And so we've been trying to do some proactive engagement. So we do have a couple of, geographically based organizations that are not neighborhood associations that I've put on this map. And so, for folks who also have connections with groups in East Portland or just around the districts, having other place-based sort of groups to go to was also a good strategy to bring messages around the transition, ranked choice voting, et cetera. So before I get into strategies, I'll hand it over to Zach or Destiny to maybe facilitate some questions if folks have any.
Great. Thanks, Fred, for modeling, putting your hand up. If anybody has any other questions, please raise your hand, use the raise hand function as well. Fred, go ahead. You have this.
Thank you, Zach. June, I've heard several different terms recently, but hard to reach voters, that kind of voter education. Voices that have not historically been heard in City Hall is another one. And you go back to your slide, which was 11, 2 slides back, and the community engagement spreadsheet that we're entering in, there's a term for homeless, LGBTA plus, and seniors, I think. I don't see seniors here, and I know that I'm reaching out to Friendly House, Elder Protection Services, which is LBT and seniors, living well, living healthy, they're at the Hollywood Neighborhood Center, but that's LGBT elders as well. Holiday Park is elders. I'm reaching out to Terwilliger Plaza and other retirement homes. I don't see where that's being tracked at least in your data here. Is that under culturally specific?
So currently
I'm confused by the mixing of the terms.
Yeah, for sure. I think just so for a clarification, in the transition engagement plan, as I'm reading it, it doesn't include seniors, but in the hard to reach voter contract, it includes seniors.
And then your tracking sheet, it has seniors.
It does have seniors, but then for our purposes for this, semantics, I guess, I am not putting it on this sheet, if that makes sense.
Okay.
But we are tracking that those are some of the folks who are reaching out
It's
to.
never been my sense that seniors who vote more than anyone else in the population are their voices left out of City Hall, so. But they do need to know how to vote.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Fred. Yeah, and I do think it's important to highlight that there might be different definitions that are being operated by us as a committee trying to get out the vote, and as well as potentially the contract or other organizations that are trying to get out the vote.
Thank you.
Thanks. Lori, go ahead.
Yeah, first I wanted to say, June, I love this analysis. It's really helpful, especially visually, to see where we've been reaching, and just listening to what you're having to say about who we're reaching and who we're not is super helpful. So thank you for putting the effort into that. My question is, you spoke about a lot of different areas, and I wonder if you could summarize, as all of us are looking at reaching out in this next quarter, I'm just kind of ginning up my machine again to see who I can reach out to. Are there areas in particular, besides just saying generally, yeah, those that are hard to reach voters, are there areas that you would like us to focus, certain areas of the city, certain population?
I feel like I have some actionable things that when we talk about strategy, so I will answer your question, Lori, in the strategy section.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
we're catching June mid presentation. I acknowledge that there's probably, I think, 4 other slides, June, that you want to present on. And so let's try to keep the comments or the questions specific to what we've seen to date on this by the numbers and geographic. Juanita, do you have a question for June? And you need to make sure to unmute yourself.
Sorry about that. I always do that. Anyway, so yeah, no, I was just comment about Fred's question. AARP has a very strong interest in working with the city and establishing some type of collaboration with them, because they have a huge network to share information and to do education with the community that they serve, which is 50 and over. And the other thing that I have neglected to do also, and I need to do that, is follow up with the Oregon Child Development Coalition. They serve Head Start program. They operate Head Start programs, and they serve a lot of the Latino community who are also known as English speaking community. So thank you.
Thanks, Juanita. I think you probably represent a lot of us who feel like, okay, now 2024 is here. We need to get going on reaching out to people we know.
I'm getting it, yeah.
Yeah, Bill, go ahead.
Well, thank you, Zach. I think I'm asking an obvious question that probably Fred and Lori have already exemplified, but with regard to the list of prospective presentations, if a neighborhood association or organization is not on that list, would you want us to initiate contact or wait until the organization asks you to add them to that list?
I will say that on the outreach spreadsheet, Bill, there's a section where it shows all the organizations we've reached out to. And since the neighborhood associations in District 1 in East Portland kind of fall into the left out of City Hall decision making, Jose has reached out to actually all of them already. And so I think if there are folks you feel connected to that you do want to reach out to after looking at our strategies, et cetera, I think you just go ahead, look at that list, and then reach out to folks.
Thank you.
Okay, June, take it away. Part 2.
Part 2. All right. So how will we meet our goals of engaging folks left out of City Hall and really also just increase our engagement? So some of the strategies which are lifted off of our engagement plan that I'm really thinking about as the coming months is being flexible in formats and timing of our presentations, dedicating more time to initial reactions to be able to establish and strengthen trust, customize outreach efforts to unique needs, build upon and leverage existing relationships, and then offer resources to reduce barriers to presentations, whether that's event sponsorships or honorariums. And so in terms of concrete action of operationalizing these strategies, I just wanted to offer some bullet points of things that I'm doing or are in the works, and also invite you all to comment on other sort of tactics that you think I should be proactive doing this next quarter. So the first thing that we're doing is in terms of leveraging networks, using the City of Portland We Are Better Together program to connect with organizations that we're members of. So for example, the city of Portland is a member of lots of culturally specific chambers of commerce. And so how do we leverage that membership to be able to get in front of that group? The other one is I've looked at the Charter Commission and Independent District Commission engagement data, and then reaching back out to those folks who haven't heard about the transition to continue to re-engage them and see if they have suggestions for folks. The other one is reaching out to specifically coalition groups who then, if we're able to have a good presentation, build trust, then we can also then expand to talking to the different groups within the coalition groups. The other one is since part of our focus are for Houseless Portlanders is going to shelter community meetings. So currently we're going to be going to 7 shelter sites to do a community presentation. And so trying to think about other ways to leverage community meetings that are happening. The other one is high school classes. I know Jane's got kind of rescheduled there, but focusing on some connections that we have with civic classes to reach youth. And then, you saw the engagement by the numbers, some of the groups that we haven't yet heard from, kind of setting a goal to reach out to 2 to 3 nonprofits serving those groups. And then the last is event sponsorships. And so I think we talked about this before, but briefly just wanted to say again that we can provide assistance on a case-by-case basis for groups. We're really targeting this assistance for groups traditionally left out of City Hall. And so this is basically offering resources necessary for hosting a conversation about the transition. So we're open to what form is most comfortable for folks. And so possible support might include helping folks find a room at the city to host something. Someone has said like, oh, it would be just helpful if you could cover the insurance for our event space. That's all we need. Or can you cover some food? Or hey, can you just help us make a flyer? So these are the different things that we can offer. And I just ask that if you'd like to offer, event sponsorships or additional resources, you can always connect them to me. I'll have a conversation with folks and see what's possible. And then we can get that all sorted. And then I'm going to end with the tools just because I don't want to not have enough time to talk about these, and then I guess we can open it up if we have time. That we have a lot of tools to support your engagement. And so we have 2 PowerPoint presentations. So one is transition focused. It does have some stuff on ranked choice voting, but it's more transition content. And then we have a second presentation that has less on the transition, but more on ranked choice voting. And then so it's a little tricky because when you open it in a web browser, your presentation sometimes doesn't show your speaker notes, but if you have to slide up to see them, and you can literally read those speaker notes verbatim and give the presentation. And it takes about 20 minutes. You can do it from your phone because he's a pro at it. The other thing we have are posters. Thank you, Leah, for requesting this. Some folks do in-person presentations and you might just want a tool. So over the break, Francisca from our team developed the posters that are on the screen, but I also printed in the room in the back. So you could bring those posters, or there's also a smaller 11 by 17 that you could bring. So these are tools you can take with you and just request them and we can try to make it happen. The other one is that we have a GTAC resources webpage. So here you can find things like the links to the presentation or outreach spreadsheet, the GTAC tracker. Also, folks have asked for email language of like, hey, can you just give me template language to reach out to somebody, including a little tidbit on we offer additional resources if you need them to participate. So that's all in there for you to see. And then another piece is we're promoting GTAC presentations on our transition newsletter. And so people can request a presentation through the webpage. And so it's another thing that's available that you could forward to folks who might be interested in learning more. And the last is, just if you're not sure if we can help, just ask us. I think we've had a request of, can you set up a Zoom meeting for me? Yes, we can do that. Can you help us create a flyer? Yes, we can do that. So let's, if you need something, let's talk about it and figure it out. And then the last thing is just a reminder that The outreach spreadsheet is to sign up to give a briefing or pair up with somebody. If you can, just log all your engagement in the GTech tracker so we can keep track of that. Email me about event sponsorships. And then if you want to do cold outreach, definitely go ahead and we welcome you to do so. Just log it on the spreadsheet or just check to just make sure that we haven't reached out to them a couple of times. And if you want to include me in as a CC or anything and whatever you do, I'm happy to help schedule, coordinate logistics for you. I think that's it.
Thanks, June. That's really, really useful information and helpful to kind of hammer in how and what resources we have. We have about 10 minutes left to take questions. So Joe, why don't you go ahead? You haven't asked a question.
Yeah, I want to say two things that I've said before again and again. One is every one of us lives in a neighborhood defined by the city and served by a neighborhood association. For ones that haven't been reached already, seems to me that each of us ought to volunteer to reach out to our own neighborhood association. And the second is, and I think maybe this is more of a big picture lament than something we can act on right now, but the city reaches out to these organizations again and again and again, always on a one-off basis, most recently by the district commission. And there's never any cumulative relationship with the city built. If we were talking about, leveraging ongoing relationships that the city has with these organizations and communities, it would be a lot easier. And so for the future, I don't know whether I'm just, whistling in the dark here, but this has been going on forever, and every time it's a one-off, and ours is just one more one-off unless we find a way to make it be part of something more consistent and ongoing.
Thanks, Joe. And I think that's a good message to the city. And fortunately, we have kind of a ongoing documentation of the groups that we've, as a committee and as a city, have interacted with. So hopefully we can retain that and build upon it. Jose, go ahead. And then I'll get to you, Fred.
Thank you.
Oh, I think you need to not be. Yeah.
First of all, thank you, June, for the amount of work you do and setting up things and helping us coordinating. So again, thank you. Groups we haven't talked about that have a lot of reach, it might not be a thing they want, but you'd be surprised how many people watch school board meetings and the reach school boards have across the community to people who generally don't pay attention to anything else. Secretaries, parents, they have a lot of reach. They're all recorded. We might have to do shorter presentations at a school board meeting, but that might be worth, and there's not that many of them. But it also might be a way to present it and then offer it to the high schools, and then they have a little presentation they can watch that we can then build off of. So
It's a good suggestion.
Thanks, Jose. Fred, go ahead, and then Juliet, and just a time check, we've got 7 minutes left.
Thanks. June, you're doing a great job, very helpful, especially for us older Luddites who don't know quite how to deal with all the technology before us. I didn't see on the engagement kind of the outreach spreadsheet, the shelter outreach, and that's houselessness is one of the very big topic for me personally, and I'm volunteering in different organizations, and I'd be very happy to participate in that. So who's doing it and how and when, it's pulled me in. Another question, LGBTQ, I've talked to bar owners, I've talked to, I understand that the Q Center is moribund, basically not functional. And then I'm doing the Elder Pride Services with Friendly House and the Hollywood Neighborhood Center. But reaching out, there's, other than the Pride Northwest, there isn't really any organized group that meets regularly other than in bars that I know, or maybe a soccer team or a baseball softball team, are they gonna wanna hear a presentation? And I know that the owner of the Eagle offered to provide a space for me, but I just couldn't see where everyone with a beer in their hand are gonna wanna listen to any of us talk about the transition during happy hour or something, you know? So thanks, Dan, but not, so I'm a little perplexed, other than, and that gets to Pride itself in June. And the fact that there's so much activity then that we could certainly do tabling. I know that in our original plan, we were gonna include city employees, and we haven't done that I'm aware of. Are there city employees who want to do this? For tabling and the voter education part, I know that we're talking about event tabling, especially in the summer when there's events all over the city. I think any of us would be happy to volunteer for those, especially if they were staffed also with city employees who know the ins and outs of getting the equipment set up and the tents and the tables and all of that. And I think that's a good experience for them as well. It could be. So that's just, are we getting into strategies or what?
Well, I appreciate those. I think for one thing, for groups we want to reach out to that maybe aren't organized in a like obvious community group, you know, I'm happy to help if we wanted to throw something together, like an event for folks, right? And so it doesn't have to be just the like groups that are already organized. We can organize people and put on an event for them. So I'm happy to work on something like that with you. And then I think the you know, highlighting Pride in June and having tabling, et cetera, would be really great. And the city already shows up there, and so we can show up too. And I think Jennifer will probably speak maybe to the employee side of things. And but yeah, thank you for that, Fred. Those are really great suggestions.
Great, thank you. Juliet?
Yeah, so kind of going off what Jose was saying about schools, at least in my neighborhood, the schools are such a presence, and not high schools. And we've been focusing on high schools because those are soon to be voters. But I think there's a lot of value, and I'm gonna just test the waters by going up to my kids' elementary school and just offering them some literature. Now, I don't wanna waste literature, but I was talking to Lori about this. We're just sort of stunned at how many people you ask, have you heard about the charter reform? And like, nothing, there's just nothing. They have no idea, but they're very open and interested. So I was just thinking of kind of as a, you know, not necessarily needing to go as far as, or a commitment for a presentation, but just, I'm thinking of just walking my neighborhood. And I have gone to my little Korean store that I talked to you about, talked to them about it. And then I found a native English speaker, their kid, gave him the literature, talked to him about it. So thinking of doing that on a broader, just kind of walking my main street going in and saying, or the bar where there are regulars. I mean, they're not busy. They have time on their hands. And so I'm wondering, have we thought about this? Have other people done this? I'm gonna take some more literature with me, but just to open the conversation. I mean, these are not people who are ready for a presentation. They don't even know this is happening. Right. So that's my 2 cents.
Thanks, Juliet. We have a couple more minutes if anybody else wants to share their own strategies, or Amy, go ahead.
I kept going back and forth about this. So somehow could we be involved in the candidate outreach? I know that's not exactly community outreach, but in that the educational thing the other night, there wasn't a single word about GTAC or the fact that we're regularly discussing the entire contents of the city transition. And it seems like a bit of a missed opportunity because they could just tune in and be up to speed with what's happening. So I don't know if that looks like tabling at those events or something like that, but some kind of presence in those spaces just to offer our information and the expertise that this committee has cultivated to those people.
Thanks, Amy. And I'm realizing that the people who could probably respond to that are probably running the other Zoom meeting, doing a training at this very moment. So, but I think it's something we should share. Appreciate you thinking about that, Amy. Jose, we've got 1 more minute. Go for it.
And Amy, you're right, because they're super open to it. I personally know some people running, and every single one that I've told about GTAC being a resource has shown up at the meeting and virtually. They might not have participated, but I've seen them at the meetings. So if you know anyone who's running, tell them, but I think that's such a good point that we should be telling all of them through the candidate training, so.
Well, thank you for all of the contribution and brainstorming, and I'm feeling like there's a lot more energy and excitement. Maybe it's just the turning of the calendar and new resolutions to uphold. So let's get at it. And thanks, June, for doing a really great synthesis of what we've done and what we have to accomplish next. So I think we can move to our next agenda item.
Thank you, Zach. As a reminder, our work plan includes items related to the city budgeting process. First, providing feedback on whether the roles and proposed transition for the city budgeting process are clear. And second, amplifying outreach and engagement opportunities related to the budget. I'll turn it over to Tim Grew, the City Budget Director, and Ruth Levine, the Deputy Director of the City Budget Office. Thank you.
Well, good evening. Nice to see you again. Probably was about a year ago when we last came in, or probably less than that. So what do we want to, if you can go to the agenda. We want to talk to you very briefly tonight, given the time. Is give you a kind of an update on the city's financial situation and the budget guidance that we're working on. Very quickly. So you know what the bureaus and all the other budget entities are facing as we go through this. And then we want to give you an overview of the budget process and particularly any changes that we're trying to make relative to what we believe will be a transition to the new form of government's budget. And then we'll talk about community engagement, and best of all, we'll try to leave enough time for you to have questions. I do want to say at the outset, if you have a question that I sit over here and I don't say anything, that probably means that we haven't had that question before, but we'll try to get back to you and get information to you on that. I hope that doesn't happen, but if it does, we'll get back to you. Next slide, please. First, I want to talk a little bit about the city's financial condition. This is a chart out of our financial forecast for the general fund. And as you know, the general fund funds many public safety, the Parks Bureau, administration, and a whole bunch of other things. And this is in large part where all of our discretionary funds are, things that aren't dedicated. The message from this chart, and as you look at this, you'll see total revenues in green, and you'll see total ongoing expenses in red. And in 24, 25, and 26, they are pretty much even. And what that means is we can continue to pay for the services that we have already budgeted, but there isn't much room above that to address new priorities or to address new things. But the good thing is we already have transition money in here and things like that. So don't get me wrong here. But we've gone from a period where we had a lot of federal funds coming in. We had more revenues than expenditures coming in, and we could actually deal with priorities going forward. That's coming to a halt for the next 3 years. Hopefully it will change, but that's where we stand right now. On the next chart, I want to dig down a little bit further. The general fund, which is part of that chart I just showed you, we have issues with fire and police staffing, in particular fire. They have each year we're having to give them one-time money to deal with overtime issues because they're having trouble with staffing their positions. It's getting better, but it's still an issue. And police staffing, that's more about having complications or difficulties in recruiting police officers into the organization. But they too have a lot of vacancies that need to be filled. And then the other thing, I mentioned federal funding earlier. The main one, the Federal American Rescue Plan, is coming to an end. And that's been giving us a lot of one-time funding, and some of that one-time funding was used for what we would call recurring services. So we need to be dealing with that as we go through this process. And that isn't just about the general fund necessarily, it's about other bureaus as well. And then, of course, what you're interested in, charter transition costs. And we'll talk a little bit more about that as we go through the next slides. And then we have a new union, new labor negotiation, which is combined is composed of what we used to call people like Ruth and I, non-represented employees. And it's kind of interesting because we're getting down in terms of the number of non-represented employees to around, I don't know, Ruth, correct me if I'm wrong, like 600 or 700 people left in the city. So we're going through labor negotiations with them for the first time, and that'll probably go on for the next year. But eventually they'll have a contract, and they'll probably come up with financial issues as well. But it's not just about the general fund. We have a lot of issues going on in non-general fund. You've probably read about it in the paper. The Portland Bureau of Transportation has a very big deficit, and that's primarily driven by reductions in parking funds and reductions in gas funds. And interestingly, you probably just heard on the radio about the state transportation organization having very similar problems that they're trying to address. And then the Bureau of Development Services, which does all of our permitting, well, construction isn't going very well. And the other permitting services that they provide aren't going very well. So they also have a big deficit. And I'm sorry to say that they've already had to lay off, I think, 50 to 70 positions to get back to a stable type of situation. Then there's the utility organizations. And the main issue there is they have a lot of work to do, major capital projects, and we're trying to keep restrained on how much the utility rates increase because that affects everybody in the city and all the businesses in the city. So that's kind of an overall picture, and there's a lot more than this, but I just wanted to give you the primary challenges that we're facing as we're going through this budget process. And to mention that that is a transition process because the budget that we create today will be half the current council and half the new council. And then on the next slide, I wanted to talk a little bit about budget guidance. And as a little bit of background, the mayor's office normally in our budget process issues a number of budget guidance memos, I'll call them. And this is the mayor indicating what type of information, in this case, he is hoping to get to help him balance his proposed budget. So in this case, we've already issued two memos. The first one provided an overview of service area budget process. Now, what do we mean by that? The service area, we are implementing service areas that are consistent with the transition to the new form of government that the council has worked on. And that's a pretty big thing. So for example, all the public safety agencies are working in a collaborative way to create a public safety budget. And the other areas are there as well. So that's a significant change in our budget deliberations. And then because of that chart I showed you in the general fund, where revenues are equivalent to expenditures, not leaving us much room to deal with priorities. For the first time in quite a while, we're doing what's called a budget constraint. What that means is we lowered the money that we're giving to our general fund bureaus below what they have had and what they would have otherwise had and based upon the prior year's budget. And I'll get into more detail of that in the next guideline. So we were informing them that that is probably going to happen. And then we also outlined a lot of priorities that the council had created and also in prior years. As Ruth will tell you, we had a session on objectives and performance measures, and we're trying to move further into that realm of having a performance budget. And Ruth talk a little bit more about that. So then Budget Guidance 2 came out with more details. And the general fund, I should have mentioned, not only did we put constraints on the general fund organizations, we put constraints on what we have called operations, which are interagency agreements, fleet services, tactical support, and all those kinds of things. And that'll flow into all of the bureaus as they decrease their budgets. Utility rates are being confined to the forecast that they provided in the prior year. So it gives them a little bit more room on the utility rates, but they still aren't increasing beyond that point. And then I should have mentioned on the constraints were 5%, which is a fairly large amount of money, especially to organizations like the Parks Bureau that has quite a bit of general fund dollars. And I should have mentioned that we excluded from that because of the focus on public safety, we excluded all the public safety agencies from having that.
So plus or minus?
Pardon me?
The constraint is less, 5% less?
5%, yes, I'm sorry, I meant to say that. And then very quickly, the mayor in this guideline provided policy issues for each of the service areas that he would like to have information on to help him develop his proposed budget. So let's go back to PBOT for a situation. What he asked them to do is give various scenarios on how they're going to address their deficit. Not just one recommendation, but what happens if they have more money in terms of their situation? What happens if they have, they can't get more resources, but they just have to live with the funds that they have? And then what happens if they have to cut again? Just to get more information on the scenarios. And there's a whole list of that. And if you're interested, we can give you a copy of the mayor's budget guidance too, and you can see what all those issues are.
They're
And I-
all on the website link on the slides.
There we
Those
go.
were there.
Thank you, Ruth.
Yeah.
And I do want to say, it's not real evident here, but a lot of what we're doing in this budget process is very focused on the transition to the new form of government. And Ruth will get into that a little bit more as she goes through the process. And with that, I'll turn it over, unless you have a question right now, I'll turn it over to Ruth.
I have a quick question. Are the council operations from the general fund as well? So those will be 5% less than.
We excluded the elected offices, part of the elected offices
Okay.
budgets, okay, and including the auditor in terms of the amount of funds that the auditor uses as an elected official.
So that original organizational chart that we've seen so far, that is the present, that's not gonna change. That's not gonna be
No,
5%.
but thank you for bringing this up. We had been hopeful that we would have deputy assistant administrators, and that didn't go as well as we would have liked it to go. And so we're doing these service areas, but they will be in charge of the current commissioners in this round. But going forward, we would expect that it would be the deputy city administrators under the new form of government, doing the budgets for these service areas, and then working with the chief administrative officer to develop the full budget, and ongoing to that to the mayor. Sorry, Ruth. Did I answer your question?
Well, so there's no deputy administrators, but then also for staffing the actual council, there's 5 like at-large, like folks that aren't working for members
Yeah.
directly. So is that changing as well, or that's?
It's not, that was the budget, so those are just being budgeted, for this next year, but no, they didn't get a reduction.
Okay. So the only thing that's changing from that org chart is the deputy administrators.
Well, no, those also haven't been added. So, yeah, I mean, they're going to be added in the budget process. So in terms of the constraint, what gets affected are it's what we call base budgets. So the budgets of bureaus like continuing operations. So all of the bureaus in the city, all their continuing operations that are funded by the general fund, except for police, fire, and 911. Those are what got subject to the 5% constraint. So it's like, yeah, those, yeah.
So if they were entitled to $100 for their next budget process, they're now getting 95.
Got it.
Okay, so I'm gonna talk a little bit about the annual budget process, and then we have about 10 minutes for questions at the end of this, so yeah. This graphic needs to be updated, but this is the overall sort of flow of the annual budget process every year. So we go from planning in the fall and having mayor's budget guidance. We have economic forecasts, financial plans. We did 2 work sessions this year in addition to the charter specific work session. And all of that kind of sets up the budget process. And so we're just kind of transitioning now into the requested budget development process, which is where all of previously the bureaus, now they're organized in their service areas, go out and develop their requests. So they take the money that they're allocated and then they can move stuff around or ask for more money in some years when it's possible, or they have to adjust to cuts. And then those will be submitted it's normally late January. This year is February 16th. And I will talk on the next slide, I think, about the different the changes that we're making to the budget process now that we're sort of testing out a new process going into the new form of government. So for this year, those will be February 16th. That the bureaus, the service areas will each submit a requested budget, as Tim was saying. And then between March and April is when there are normally more community listening sessions and the like, and I'll talk about that as well. But April is the month where those will be happening. And I know that's something that this group is interested in. By May 5th and on May 2nd, in 2024, the mayor releases his proposed budget. So that's the kind of first complete budget for the whole city, because in the requested budgets, it will be one service area at a time. Each bureau essentially has to balance their revenues and expenditures, but the whole city, the first kind of balanced budget, as it were, comes out in the mayor's proposed budget. And then in mid-May, council votes to approve the budget, and they can obviously make amendments. And then June is when they adopt the budget, and there's not very much time for amendments between May and June. So that's a quick overview of the budget process, and I'll talk a little bit more about this year and what's changing, why things are changing. So as Tim talked about, we're doing a service area budget development process this year. So I think the way I conceptualize generally the annual budget process is towards the end of the process, like starting May 2nd, there's not that much flexibility. It kind of is driven by Oregon state budget law. There's not very much we can do in terms of changing how that flows. But getting to the mayor's proposed budget is where you'll see some of the impacts of the change in the form of government. And that's because, if you think about in the old form of government, each bureau was kind of operating in their silo with their commissioner in charge, where they went off and made their budget, and it was, with their interests and their commissioner's decisions reflected. Now, this year, we have this transitional version where we have a service area. And the idea is hopefully we're moving towards a kind of more centralized approach where, the different interests are being weighed across the entire city as they develop their budget. And so we've front loaded some more of the work this year in terms of trying to have that kind of more citywide approach in budget development. And so that shows up in the service area budget development process, which includes currently all of the service areas are meeting with all their bureaus and their commissioner in charge to consider kind of their scenarios or their options to balance their budgets, given the constraint and a lot of the financial issues that Tim talked about. And then at the end of January, the mayor will be attending all of those meetings. And then in the first 3 weeks of February, will be the work sessions. And so that's the next kind of sort of segment of the slide there where so we're pushing back the date for the requested budget so that they can have this more sort of robust process. We're pushing up the dates of the work session so that council can actually deliberate those budgets before they get submitted. And then so those are kind of schedule wise some of the main changes this year. And then the other kind of changes this year are, one is obviously budgeting the new organizational structure, which is a big lift for staff and on the technical side in terms of updating our data, financial data to reflect the new organizational structure. And then adding positions that were part of the organizational chart and, you know, moving revenues around to be able to support that. And so they're we're working with service areas about getting that more detailed layer of information than we had, you know, back in November, reflected in their budgets and that they'll submit in February. And then the last piece Tim mentioned also is kind of continuing this sort of ongoing progress that we've been trying to push around outcomes-based budgeting and thinking about you know, the impact of budget decisions on kind of not just the services that we provide as a city, but what the outcomes are of those services, and being really, we had the work session on November 15th that reviewed council's priorities, and bureaus are being asked to try to connect their budget decisions to those outcomes. Now that's harder, I think, in a cut year or in a constraint year, because in a lot of cases, you know, we're just looking at sort of the least impactful cut that can be made in terms of the budget. But in some cases, they're thinking about weighing one program against another or the like. So that's kind of where that piece comes in this year. Slide. So in future years, we've had some initial conversations about the listening sessions that are coming up in April, but we really haven't tackled the whole ecosystem of community engagement, and I'll talk about that on the next slide. Tim also mentioned, obviously, the city administrator and deputy city administrators will be in place by the time we're doing this next year, so that will be an additional change. And then continuing the work I was just talking about, connecting budget proposals to performance measures and evaluation plans. I think going into the new form of government, my hope is anyways, that it will be more conducive to that kind of thinking in terms of trying to figure out how we actually have performance measures and how those attach to outcomes for the community, and what types of projects should involve sort of outside evaluation plans or outside evaluations, and what do we do in-house and the like. So that's something we're continuing to work on. Thank you. Okay, and then this I sort of updated this slide. So these are the different pieces of community engagement in the budget. We have on the far, and the darker ones are sort of legally required. On the far left, we have a citywide budget advisory committee that is most involved in sort of May and June, but exists throughout the year. We have the Portland Insights Survey, which has both a quantitative survey and qualitative focus groups. That they do the focus groups in odd numbered years and the survey in even numbered years. So the 2024 survey is currently in development. Bureau budget advisory committees are not legally required. We've had them. Not every single bureau has one, but the larger bureaus do. They meet throughout the budget development process, and then they are allowed to submit a statement or a letter with the Bureau's requested budget. Public listening sessions I mentioned in April. Those, yeah, those are not really constrained, I guess, legally. They can take different forms. And then obviously there's the public testimony at the budget hearings. And we have the TSCC, which is the Tax Supervising Conservation Commission, which covers all taxing jurisdictions in Multnomah County, or they're required in Oregon. So ours is from Multnomah County. That is a board made up of community members, or the commission rather, and that meeting happens in June. Thank you. Yeah, others.
I'd just like to elaborate on one point on this
Sure,
chart.
yeah.
And that is the Portland Insight Survey. And I should say that Ruth used to be our performance manager in the CBO, and she's largely been responsible for this new survey. And the reason I wanted to bring it up and listening to your prior conversation, the difficulty in getting outreach to certain communities within our city. This survey intentionally worked very hard to make sure that we heard from everybody in this survey. And in fact, so hard that we went back several times until we got responses that we felt represented all the communities in the thing. So if you ever have an opportunity to review it, I don't think you'll find anything very surprising in there, but I think you'll be interested in seeing how they managed to get what I would get a good slides of the people that are actually in our city. So I just wanted to give that some.
Yeah, and that's all we have. I'm happy to take questions and see if you in the hands. You call it before.
Thank you, Tim and Ruth. Currently we're at time for this agenda topic. I would like everyone to put it in the chat, but if anyone has a brief question, please feel free, drop your hands, but whoever has a brief question, 2 to 3 minutes tops. But for the rest, please put them in the chat. See if we have enough time at the end of the meeting to get to them. Because we still have the transition bundle to budget development in the next 10 minutes and change management. So I want to make sure we honor people's time.
And perhaps if you wanted to, you could send us the chats and we could try to get back to you on those.
Absolutely. Okay.
I just would like to make a comment. Destiny, it will take me a minute. I'm just really concerned about the mention about changes to community engagement. We'll go back to the comment that was made earlier by, I think it was Joe, regarding the lack of a systemic approach to community engagement, citywide. That is a structure that is there, that is responsible for recruitment, the advisory committees, and training our advisory committees. So it is consistent in that, especially that is not, they're not trained by different departments, and and they don't, and they may not sometimes understand their authority in terms of their approval or disapproval of what those budgets are determining. So I'm just want to put it as a record, also in the record, that it's really important that there's a funding allocated in the new budget for developing it doesn't have to be 10 people, but maybe a couple of people who will be responsible to doing recruitment and community engagement. I just want to do that because I'm really worried about this. When we talk about this community engagement for this new budget, I was reading that, and it's a very limited amount of time that is available for really people to become engaged and ask questions about the budget. There's a citywide budget advisory committee. Is a committee, is a community involvement committee and citywide. So anyway, I'm just really concerned about some of these issues, but I will try to put them on the chat. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Juanita. And there are more questions in the chat, and I see that Ruth is answering them. I'll have 1 more minute. Any other brief question or comment? Fred?
Yeah, just quickly, I understand that both the Water Bureau and the Sewer Bureau, BES, pay a franchise fee to the city. As a certain percentage for use of the public right of way. And it's probably the only city in the country that charges itself a franchise fee as opposed to a investor-owned utility. All right, but it kind of, to that, if the fees go up for water or sewer, that increases the amount then that goes to the general fund from a fee increase, and that's accounted for.
I guess two things I would say to that. One is we've been doing that for a long time.
I know, since Measure 5.
And unless the franchise fee increases, which it really hasn't for a long time, it's just blended into all of their expenditure type things. And I recently actually looked at franchises in the state of Oregon and outside the state of Oregon, and it's surprising to me as well, pretty common that they're doing that with if they have utilities like we have that they're doing.
Okay, which gets me to this issue of, and you used a term that I'm not aware of, I'm sure there is with the siloization that we have, interagency agreements.
So that is like, I think this is actually a good thing in a lot of respects. So let's just take all the fleets we have, the vehicles and that sort of thing. We have a central organization for the most part that is responsible for buying vehicles and maintaining the vehicles. And they send out what's called interagency agreements based upon the volume of work that things do. So for example, I have an interagency that goes to the police bureau. So the police bureau is paying for those services. And the PBOT is paying for those services, rather than all those organizations having separate fleet types of operations.
But does this new organization affect that? I mean, because now you've bunched bureaus into these 6, 7 service areas, they're not going to have interagency agreements within a service area, or are they? I mean,
No,
they're keeping the bureaus intact, so we're not getting rid of bureaus, we're just putting them in these service area slots for now.
They will continue to be allocated to the bureaus within those service areas, okay? Now, it could change over time as consolidation.
Thank you all for the questions. I just want to make sure that we recognize that there's more interest in conversation about budget. And this is, as we know, is ongoing. And so we'll work with the transition team figuring out and thinking about the future agendas to maybe have more of the explanatory questions answered. And we'll make sure offline that we get these questions, if you post them in the chat, answered by the city budget office. I think Leah, you had something time sensitive that you wanted to make sure to share or raise to the group.
Yes, thank you, Zach. I appreciate that. I'm going to try to be as brief as possible and say I'm here to make a motion tonight in relation to the meeting that we had in December about the budget. We talked a lot about the transition and the funding for the new form of government. Amy spoke to council operations for it. At the last meeting, very briefly, Terry brought up a great line of questioning relating to staffing for council. And relating to the fact that the district and council operations subcommittee found that the amount of staffing that we were allocating for council, 1 staff per council person, is vastly understaffed as compared to our peer cities. Because of this, we have concerns that we are hampering them from the very beginning in their ability to be effective and ensure that they're able to serve the needs of constituents. So I feel pretty strongly that we need to make a recommendation that we reconsider that budget and increase the amount of staffing for our future city council. In doing so, making sure that we're being aware of budget constraints and making recommendations of how we could potentially shuffle funds. And so I'm going to put my motion in the chat. This is something that I want to note that I've chatted with Terry about offline, since I could see his line of questioning from last time, understanding he's an alternate who cannot bring motions to the full GTAC floor. It's something that we have talked about though. So I'm going to read this out loud and in chat. I move that the districts and council operations subcommittee discuss and draft a letter to the mayor and city council that A, recommends that the budget for council staffing be increased to be in line with staffing levels at peer cities. B, acknowledges budgetary constraints and offers suggestions for how the council operations budget could be reallocated to fund said staffing. And C, is delivered by February 16th, 2024, so that it be considered in the budgeting process. With that, I will stop.
Would you accept a friendly amendment?
I think, do we need a second before we
Okay,
actually
thank you.
have
Yeah,
any?
you're right.
Do I have a second?
I second the motion.
Okay, Juanita seconds. Juanita, go ahead. You have your hand up and you want to make a friendly amendment?
Yeah, friendly amendment. If I don't know, you will agree to this, but needs to be. I would like to include in your motion also the strengthening funding to strengthen the community involvement or the community engagement for the city. Since that was a major, I felt like it was a very stress in the charter about developing a participatory type of government. And really, I don't see that yet happening. And so I just would like to add that.
So is there specific language that how you want to add that in, or Leah, do you want to craft something that
Yes, that one you made it let me see, you put it already in the chat. So Brazos City Council. Trying to look in the language that is there. Anyway, so just to go this, that the city must consider the appropriate funding or adequate funding for the development of a community engagement department that will provide the just within a structure. I don't know. I apologize. I cannot come up with the language right now.
Juanita, if I could suggest, maybe we go with the motion Leah has set forward, because it specifically talks about staffing and then also acknowledging the constraint, and we can also have a second motion afterwards that will continue in line with February 16th.
Yeah, okay, that would be fine. Let's move on with that motion since we're out of time.
Okay, any other questions or comments? I know we have time constraints.
I will say I just put in an edited version that added in Juanita's suggestion about community engagement in there. Doesn't need to be though, fine with going with just the first motion.
Point of order. I'm confused. Are we to discuss and vote on this motion tonight, or is this something we would take up at the next meeting?
The motion is on the table for tonight.
It's on the table per the agenda, or is this, okay?
It was motioned now by Leah.
Yes, okay.
The reason I'm bringing this up is we have a tight timetable for this. So my motion is that we vote on it as a full committee tonight, and we authorize the district and council operations subcommittee to draft the letter so that they don't have to bring it back to the full committee again, and they're able to just draft it.
Yeah. That's not.
Okay. Terry and Amy, first Terry and then Amy, please, brief comments if able.
Yeah, thanks for Lee for bringing this. It is kind of important that we get on with this because as the previous presentation shows, the budget process marches forward regardless of GTEC's meeting schedule. So my worry in December is the same worry as I have now, is that a lot of these decisions get baked in early on with memos and work sessions and that sort of thing. And we just need to have our input on this important topic for the city council now. I don't understand who, which service area covers the city council staffing. What constituency is out there to advocate for city council staffing? City council staffing in the November council decision is really, really, really understaffing what is going to be necessary to run a 12-member council. And I've got a ton of research on it and prepared to bring that to the districts committee as we do that drafting. But I just want to say thanks for Leah to bringing this forward. And I hope we get some favorable votes tonight.
Thank you, Terry. Amy, brief comments.
I think that we're covering it in the notes. I was typing at the same time as Leah. It looks like Destiny might have typed nearly the same thing. So wanted to acknowledge that Juanita's suggestion is easily considered in some of the versions in the notes right now.
Thank you.
Thank you. And then Fred, brief comments.
Yes, clarification. I could support staff for the general counsel, but you know, supporting the committees and the like under the purview of the council president, the vice president. But the way the motion's worded, it sounds like you're proponing additional staff for each of the individual council members. That I would oppose. I think they're part-time, they're policymakers only. They need as a body to have support staff. And so if that's the purpose of this, I strongly object. Moreover, I understood when we agreed to have subcommittees that the subcommittees would deliberate and then make feedback back to the full committee for the full committee to take action. This contravenes that. Since apparently there was a discussion, not at the last GTAC meeting, but at the Roles and Purposes subcommittee meeting to this regard that I was not privy to until now.
Fred, I think to answer your question, we don't have a current subcommittee that's specific to the budget. And so this is an ongoing conversation that relates to the full committee budget conversation that we had last month. And it sounds like there is a lot of moving parts right now. So I want to try to simplify. We had a motion by Leah that was amended by Juanita that's in chat. And that a friendly amendment was approved, I think, by Leah kind of indirectly by providing that draft language. And so I think the question we have is, do we have a motion to pursue a authoring of a draft letter that we would then vote to approve at our next meeting to submit to city council in its budget proceedings? I think is that correct, Leah, or am I
That's correct. I do want to clarify one thing, Fred, that I misspoke on. So my recommendation is we're sending this to the district and council subcommittee so that they can draft the letter. We will have a full GTAC meeting on February 6th. And at that time, the full committee could accept the letter at that point. So there is still another time when it can come back to the full group. I apologize, I was wrong.
And that committee would have, it says in the amendment, to discuss and draft. And so more comments that would be held there.
Okay,
Amy?
and yeah, go ahead, Amy, sorry.
I can be brief, but to clarify some of our learnings from the subcommittee is that we kind of have the tentative thing that was my understanding was that we were going to make recommendations based on the present budgeting levels. Like, here's what you can afford and here's what you need to afford, which isn't outside of this amendment, but just for everybody's information, that was sort of a working understanding, because like, we don't think that they can create more money, but they are like really not going to have enough staff to like do what they're trying to do based on our research.
Yeah. I just wanna really quickly say that I think it's really important that we don't wait a long time, because Terry just mentioned, the process is moving. And I just want to make sure that it's on the record that what are our recommendations and what are the priorities that we think that are so critical. And therefore we want to make sure that they convey to the city council or to the mayor or whoever we need to send it to. But this is really important, and because otherwise the system is moving,
Thank you, Juanita. So now that we've had all of these comments, again, this is a motion with Juanita's amendment to put to a vote now. The District and Council Operations Subcommittee will discuss and draft a letter to the mayor and city council that A, recommends that the budget for council staffing be increased to be in line with staffing levels at peer cities, and B, acknowledges the need to better staff for community engagement. C, acknowledges budgetary constraint and offers suggestions of how the council operations budget could be reallocated to fund said staffing, and D, is delivered by February 16, 2024, so that it will be considered in the budgeting process. That's the motion, and now I will have Julia help me with a roll call.
Sure. Leah,
Yes.
David is absent. Jane. Jane, can you hear me?
Sorry, no.
No. Jose,
Yes.
Money,
Yes.
Lori,
Yes.
Joe. Gotcha. Juliet,
No.
Zach,
Yes.
Destiny,
Yes.
Bobby. Is absent. Fred,
No.
Amy Randall,
Yes.
Juanita,
Yes.
Amy Wood. Amy, can you hear me?
Yes.
Amy Wood.
Can you hear me? Sorry, I said yes a couple times.
Oh, I'm sorry.
She was on mute.
Gotcha. Yes. Okay. That is 9 yeses. Yeah, 9 yeses is enough. I'm sorry. Pay no attention to me. So yes, that motion passes.
Thank you so much, Julia. Thank you, Lee and Terry, and for everyone's comments. Again, this is this will be for discussion and drafting in the Districts and Councils Operations Subcommittee. And Jose, is it a question or a comment? Because I do want to move on to change management because we're very behind on agenda.
It's both.
Oh, could you put it in the chat? See if we have any time
I
left.
cannot. Sorry. I'm one of the co-chairs of the committee. This is being sent to write a letter about, but we don't have a scheduled meeting right now in time. And even if we did, crafting one of these letters at the subcommittee meeting at the way they're structured now wouldn't be ideal. So I would like 3 people that sit on that subcommittee to volunteer to write that letter, and then we can schedule a subcommittee meeting to then talk about and read feedback, so we can have at least a draft. I know there's only a week to do it because our next one is coming right up next week. So who are the people that would want to put together a draft of that meeting, please?
I can put it in the chat.
And you can put it in the chat, and then we'll get in touch with you so that can be put together before our next subcommittee meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Jose, for interrupting me and putting that logistical order. Yes, put your name in the chat if you would like to help draft that letter. Okay, and so I'm mindful of time, 7:43. Shoshana Oppenheim has put in the chat that budgeting updates have not changed. And so we would like to skip forward in the essence of time to change management. Let me find that slide to introduce.
Yeah, we got it. That's me. So our work plan includes reviewing and tracking employee engagement metrics and feedback through reports or periodic presentations. So we have Jennifer and Jamie here from the transition team. We're going to present to the city's plan to support employees through the change of the new form of government. So go ahead, Jamie and Jennifer. you're in the
Thank
room.
you. Yeah,
Yeah.
thanks, Zach. Yeah, and actually Jamie sends her regrets. She had to miss this meeting due to a family emergency. So hello, everyone. Good evening. My name is Jennifer Chang, she, her pronouns on the transition team, helping to support our change management efforts to support employees through this change to new form of government. And it's good to be here tonight. I know that it was probably several months ago, back in October, that I was at past GTAC meeting sharing about the draft plan at that time. Since that time, we've been gathering a lot of great feedback from several members from this committee and also from city employees across different groups, different levels of managers and people who are non-supervising staff to get feedback to improve and our final plan, which was finalized in November. And so I wanted to just take a moment in the next slide to just highlight some of the key things that we heard both from GTAC members and also from employees that were incorporated into the final version. You may recall I think you had the chance to read the draft plan. It was very long. It had several sections. And so much of the feedback we heard was to have a really clear explanation that speaks to employees on why the city is changing and why now. And so really focusing on that, the importance of the purpose and the why of the change. And that we needed to include organizational culture and building trust as really central elements of any approach that we do. And then many of these themes were also heard from employees that we talked to, our colleagues who shared focus on a very person-centered approach and use clear language, again, talking about what is changing and why, and really having employee-focused communications, key messages that really elevated themes around valuing people and their work, but that people as individuals and they're part of being part of this organization of the city. And finally, to have the plan be more short and simple. And so we took that and much more feedback to incorporate in the final plan. You had the links shared of the plan. It's also on our website. I'll be glad to share with June and Julia after this meeting to resend that if you haven't seen it. But I want to just walk through a few of the highlights of the plan and then really focus the bulk of the time on what to expect this year, like what is actually going to be starting up and launching in the coming months. So objectives of our plan is really to focus on three main areas, like what is it that we want to ensure that we're doing when we reach out to individuals. One, we want to inform and educate people about the new form of government. Second is increased connections between individuals and teams. This transition and the change to the new form of government offers a really excellent opportunity for us to be both reinforcing and building positive culture in the organization, and also setting those operating and kind of interpersonal norms of interacting in the months and years to come. And then finally, strengthening our organizational culture. And then our approach, which is I like to think of as the building blocks of how we're going to support all of the activities and events and type of opportunities that we're going to be providing this year. It's really fourfold. One is having clear and effective communication. The next aspect is building trust through taking time and effort to build relationships. The third is investing in and developing knowledge and skills. So this is important as we're moving to a mayor council form of government. It's important that people are developing both the knowledge and skills set to operate and be successful and effective in that new environment. And then finally, embracing growth, adaptability, and improvement. So really recognizing that this transition is a historic, kind of once in a generation opportunity, and at the same time, we'll be doing we are navigating through a lot of complexity, and so there is this need to try new things, to learn from that, improve, and then reapply processes to make them the best they can be. So next, our efforts in supporting employees are highly dependent on partnerships with other implementation teams that are leading parallel processes of implementing the changes. And there's in these bullet points, just a few of them. Technical implementation, we just heard from Tim and Ruth around budget processes. And we've also been discussing the importance of many other areas of work that we'll need to collaborate and stay aligned to. And then it's important also that our transition team members are intentionally collaborating across many different bureaus and teams to both plan for and implement different efforts and resources that are supporting employees. So we've just listed a few here on the slide, but they include our Bureau of Human Resources, several teams and colleagues within that bureau, our Office of Equity, our affinity, they're called DEEP, employee resource groups, and then several other individuals who are subject matter experts, and then also consultants with the expertise and experience in change management. Next slide. So I am going to skip over this slide. It mainly in the plan describes that there are many different roles related to change management. So those are important. So I really want to focus on this aspect, which is what is coming up in 2024. It's already here, right? So we're in January, and wanted to highlight three main areas, the broader categories of what people can be expecting. The first is really focused employee communications and ongoing updates related to the transition. So these efforts are beginning this month and next, and they include several different areas, but I'd like to highlight a few. One is we are going to be launching an employee-focused e-newsletter on a monthly basis that really focuses on the transition. So it doesn't have a name defined yet, but the top 5 updates related to what's happening. And also in that, we'll be featuring just some short video clips in reaching out to other employees and talking with them about what are they experiencing, what are some of the changes, ways that they're navigating through the change. So we'll have some of those short clips embedded in the newsletter. We'll also be continuing or starting up again our town halls. I know that the transition team started this last year. I think we had at least 2 or 3 of them, but we'll be doing those on a quarterly basis and intentionally planning those together with our comms team and our wellness resource team in BHR, our Bureau of Human Resources, so that it's not only providing just updates about the transition, but also linkages to many of the existing resources, wellness resources, trauma-informed support, change management, so we'll be able to plan that in coordination with them better and also share about existing resources. And the second area is really focused on training and resources. So training is described as specifically change management training and helping people navigate through change and organizational change situations. So this is where we're heavily working, partnering, and just really leaning on the leadership of expertise of our Bureau of Human Resources colleagues, and identifying new partnerships and consultants that are developing change management training specific to different groups within the city. Those include managers and supervisors. We know that that's an extremely important group of people, the people managers, part of the change management, and there'll be a new training series that we're right now in the process of developing, finalizing the consultant partners, and then we'll be developing that. They will be developing that in partnership with us over the next couple of months to launch in March of this year. In addition to that, there'll be online resource toolkits, and we will also plan peer workshops in conjunction with those trainings, because oftentimes, it's not just you attend a training and receive content, but you actually need opportunity to practice that, learn from it, just figure out how to apply the tools. So we're planning to have those opportunities as well. Then we'll also be continuing some jurisdictional peer panels for our executive leadership team, which includes a Bureau of Directors. And that will focus on topics that are bringing in learnings from peer cities, bringing in guest speakers around topics that those leaders are helping to identify, but also just have that opportunity for them to learn from and apply that to our current, the challenges and opportunities in our current situation and time. And then finally, we have a category of support that we're just right now describing as employee support opportunities. This includes several different things, and we're partnering with several groups. But one example of this is to launch and build a peer support network that'll be comprised of staff members and employees that will have resources, and then be able have some trainings and opportunity, and then be able to support colleagues within their teams or bureaus. And then there's also some appreciation events and office hour type activities that we're planning. This has not been fully planned out. That will be occurring in the spring, so that we'd be starting that in early summer into the latter part of the year. So moving to this next slide, thanks. We recognize the importance of GTAC's role in helping us to both provide feedback and guidance, but also help us in tracking the success and effectiveness of implementing our work. And to support this, we put together kind of this as an example of our initial thinking. This is only 3 of the activities that I had shared about, but just some metrics that we would plan to track on. So we know these are really heavily quantitative metrics, right? We want to measure that we're actually delivering and producing and, for example, sending out newsletters on a monthly basis. And we can look at things such as open rates and even do some survey. I mean, I think this is where we would love to hear your thoughts, either today or more likely after, on how to actually capture the qualitative aspect of and impact, longer term impact of these support structures as we move forward. So I'll pause there and see. I have a budget slide, but I think we were running out of time.
Thanks, Jennifer. I'm sorry we gave you the end of the agenda and time constraints, but I appreciate the presentation, and we have maybe a minute or two if there's anybody who wanted to ask an immediate question. But Julia has offered, if you want to add it to chat, or you can follow up afterwards, and Julia can help connect you with Jamie and Jennifer to follow up on any questions you have about what you've seen today. Okay, seeing nobody poised to start talking, I'm going to just pass it ahead to Destiny for next steps.
Thank you, Zach. Thank you, Jennifer, again for being so amazing in your presentation. Again, please send your questions via email to Julia so that we could get those responses back and published. Next steps is the meeting is being recorded and will be posted on the committee website. The next District and Council Operations Subcommittee meeting is Friday, January 19th. The next full GTAC meeting is Tuesday, February 6th. And the next Voter Education Subcommittee meeting is the week of or on February 12th. Again, thank you again. And at this point, next slide, please. Yes, you can see these agenda items here with all of our scheduled meetings on the transition website. Next slide, please. I want to say thank you to everyone for your participation tonight. And I now put this meeting adjourned.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.